We welcome everyone joining us for another edition, our final edition of this season for the Stingers Up Sacramento State Football Podcast. I'm your host, Jason Ross. Thank you so much to all of you for being with us all season long for another year of Hornet football. Saddened that it's not going on. The 4-year playoff streak is over, and Sacramento State will have to get back at it next year and try to rebound from what was truly a difficult and disappointing season. Today on the podcast, we will look back at the final game, the Causeway Classic. We will have kind of a season in review. The Hornets did get some recognition with some postseason awards. We'll talk about that. And we'll talk about what's next for Sacramento State, all in this final edition of the Stingers Up Sacramento State Football Podcast. But let's jump into it and get to the Causeway, because I will tell you my honest feeling getting ready for the Causeway. I was nervous for the Hornets. I didn't like the way the Hornets were playing. They just lost another game, a heartbreaking game to Cal Poly. And they were playing a Davis team that has had a better season, that is ranked 5th, that was loaded, had so many seniors. I mean, as I prepped for the game, you're looking at some things. You know, the Hornets were saying goodbye to 18 seniors, and I think in their starting lineup or in their two deep, 10 of those 18 were playing on the Causeway, in the Causeway game. Davis was saying goodbye to 34 seniors. 30 of them, 30, were in some form in the starting group of the two deep or in the two deep. So first or second string. So almost everybody, it's an experienced team, a good team, and they've been playing well. They lost the week before, a tough loss to Montana State, but just all the way through was feeling like everything is kind of lining up in about as difficult a way as it could for the Sacramento State Hornets. But that's why you play the game, right? That's the old adage. And the Hornets, you know, it was a pleasant surprise. Even something as early as the opening coin toss. The Hornets won the toss and elected to defer. And I'm thinking in my mind that is the exact right strategy. You want the ball to start the second half. But I'm thinking, man, Davis is probably going to get the ball right away and go down the field and score. And Davis got the ball right away and went down the field and scored. And 6 plays? Took about 3 minutes. And Samuel Batu caught a touchdown, and it was 7-0 already. But to the Hornets' credit, they came right back, and they got in the game and did a really good job. And I've never left a Causeway feeling good after a loss, but that one I did. And good is a relative term, right? I mean, I was proud of the Hornets, and I don't know what that does for them or for Andy Thompson and the coaching staff, but I literally was proud of the way they played. I thought they were going into almost what would be an unfair fight. And not only did they hang with the Aggies, they had their chances to win and more than represented themselves well in this game. So after one quarter, the Hornets had it tied at 7 apiece as Conklin hit Grover for a touchdown. Then it seemed like the game was slipping a little bit on the Hornets, where the Aggies got 2 straight scores in the second quarter to go up 14, then 21-7. And the Hornets had a drive that was the Hornets' turnover inside the red zone, which was a killer pick. And I thought, well, this is about when the game is going to get away from Sacramento State. They got the ball back before the half, went down the field and scored, and did the exact thing of what you want from winning the coin toss. You want to score last in the second quarter and score first in the third quarter. They did that exact thing. They got that bridge score, and it started with a Jared Gibson 22-yard touchdown reception from Conklin before the half, and then Gibson caught a short touchdown pass in the third quarter, and the Hornets were tied at 21 apiece, and then went ahead in the third quarter, entering the fourth quarter of the Causeway, leading 24-21. Then the fourth quarter was absolutely wild, back and forth. Larison would score, and then when the Aggies caught what I still think is a controversial touchdown in the back of the end zone, Winston Williams, it was ruled a touchdown, 8 yards out. I'm calling the game on TV. I'm looking at a lot of the same replays that you guys are. I had no other benefit or advantage that was different than you. I did not think he got his toe down, but it was called that way. Talked to a couple of replay people after the game. They said on zooming in, they thought they could see some pebbles coming up from the back of the end zone. And it was also one of those things, since it was ruled that way, the call stood, so it wasn't confirmed, but a big play. And so the Aggies then went ahead 35-24. I'm thinking, well, Hornets, nice job, but probably over. Not so fast. Hornets go on a 7-play, 70-yard drive. Elijah Tolliver would score just a wild sequence from Carson Conklin, dodging people left and right. And so Hornets go for 2. They get it. They're now down 35-32. Then with just over 2 minutes to go, what felt like the back-breaking play, Larison, a 59-yard touchdown run, put the Aggies back up 10. Hornets in a minute and 2 went down the field and got a Scudero touchdown from Conklin. And so now the Hornets are down 3, had to kick onside, and really a very good onside kick. But unfortunately, it was recovered by who else but Lan Larison, and the Aggies end up winning 42-39. Individually, I thought it was one of Conklin's best games by far, 32 of 44, 389, 5 touchdowns. He also was intercepted once, but he broke the school record for most passing yards by a freshman QB. Big days from several receivers. You had Tao Tolliver with 70 yards receiving and a score. Gibson had 53 yards receiving and 2 scores. Anderson Grover, 10 catches, 102 and a score. And Danny Scudero, 7 for 140 and a score. The defense, I thought, played their hearts out. And, again, a bit, in a sense, feeling like they're overmatched based on all the injuries they had. This team never used it as an excuse. It was their reality. And, unfortunately, that capped a 1-7 league play and a 3-9 regular season. So standards that this team has set, that's the encouraging thing. This was unacceptable for everybody that has done all that winning over the last 4 years, whether it's 3 Big Sky championships or a 4th trip to the playoffs. That's the new bar. That's the new norm. So can you have a down year? Sure. You don't want to put them together, though. You got to spread that out. And this was one time. And if it happens again, then you really start to do some head scratching and wonder what's really going on. But 3-9, the reasoning, I would say, for a lot of it certainly was injuries, but I also don't want to diminish some poor play and missed opportunities, because that did happen. I think if we look back at the season, some of the things that stick out to me, we knew the schedule would be tough, and I said it so much on this podcast, playing up twice is brutal, and the Hornets hung with San Jose State and were kind of in the game with Fresno State. But even with that, even with those 2 losses to begin the year, I thought it was very, very important for this team to be 2-2 after 4, and they were. And I think, to me, the first real eye-opening game of the season, because that kind of is where I thought the Hornets would be as 2-2 entering the Big Sky. I think if you looked at their Big Sky schedule, I mean, they didn't have to play Montana this year. There were some other, it wasn't as fortunate not to play Northern Colorado, but they didn't have to play Idaho. So you had some things in their favor. And all those road games at the beginning of the year, I think, may have done its damage too. But to open up Big Sky play at Northern Arizona, that was the first real eye-opening game for me, because that one I thought they completely got outplayed. Just completely got outplayed. After that, then there was the 2 straight home games after the bye, and Eastern Washington felt like a must-win, and they had their chances in the first half, but couldn't put it away in the second half, lost that one. The following week, kind of the gutty hang-on double overtime win over Weber when they were moments away from just routing them. But it felt like the season was kind of maybe back on track. It was going to take a lot of work, but I think the schedule ahead of them had some opportunities to make it really interesting. And after that Weber State win, that killer loss at Idaho State, and that's a game that the team did self-destruct. That was as painful of a loss that I've been a part of for the Hornet program. There's others, and maybe there's some recency bias. But that game, it was so self-induced. This team had their chances. They had some more injuries in that game, but the turnovers, the mistakes they made, and they lost a game in overtime. Then they get humbled at home by Portland State, get worked at Montana State, the disappointing loss to Cal Poly, and losing the season to end out at UC Davis. So it's 5 straight losses to end the year. And as I said, 3-8 is not going to please, or 3-9, is not going to please anybody in the program. Nobody should be happy or satisfied or accepting of that. Conference record of 1-7, and that's the bar this program is now set. They now know they can win conference championships. They know they can be a playoff team. And they knew this year, look, I think the Big Sky coming in was going to get 4 or 5. Officially, they got 5 teams into the postseason. Montana State was supposed to be there. They become the 1 seed. UC Davis, I think, was threatening to be one of those teams, and they are there. Montana's generally there, and they won the league and got to the championship a year ago. They're back. Idaho had a good team last year, has a good team again this year. And then NAU was the surprise team, and I think that's a spot where maybe the Hornets could have been, but they weren't, and now they need to figure out why. What went wrong? What kept them from being one of those teams in the postseason? And that's what Andy Thompson, the coaching staff, the decision makers really have to figure out is how do they avoid this again? Now, some of the injuries were just absolutely overwhelming and surprising. I am looking at the beginning, game 1, too deep for the Sacramento State Hornets. And if you just look at this, the game that they were playing, San Jose State, how many people were scheduled to be week 1 starters or backups that weren't by the end of the year? I mean, it's just amazing. Joey Wright spent some time injured. Brandon Souza, Jackson Slater, the All-American, got hurt at the end of the year. Jose Soto got hurt in the Fresno State game. Kendall Riley got hurt and missed the remainder of the season. The tight end position, I said this in the broadcast, Hornets started the year with 8. They were down to 3. Coleman Kuntz, Jay Rudolph out for the season. Makai Cope as a receiver out for the season. You look at just different spots. Caden Bennett started the year at QB. You had just Zeke Burnett at running back. In the defensive side of things, you had Mason Brousseau, Brandon Knott, Tyler Henry, Josh Cacciola, Nakayan Jackson. The amount of people that got injured on this team. Caleb Higgins, who did come back at the end, but he was hurt. DJ Houston lost for the season. I just have not seen that many injuries to one squad in 1 year. Now, it happens. Everybody gets injured, but the volume the Hornets just couldn't overcome, and it was too impactful. And so now you hope they've got a off-season of rest, rehab, recruiting, and getting better is basically what they've got to do. Do want to acknowledge, though, a couple of people that got awards, for their performance this year. 5 Sacramento State football players were named to the All Big Sky Conference teams, as that was announced last week. Jackson Slater and Will Leota were on the first team. And again, Will Leota preseason was kind of on that first team watch list, and here he is at the end, only playing 1 year as a Hornet. Jackson Slater, a great Hornet, and I felt for him getting hurt late in the year, but because he is a guy that has tremendous NFL potential, so I wish a speedy recovery for him and his pro day and all that, and hopefully we see him get drafted. Jared Gibson had a good senior season, kept moving up that wide receiver ladder in Hornet history. He finished second team. Elijah Tolliver and Zach Schreiner ended up as honorable mentions for Sacramento State. So that's kind of a look back at the Causeway season in review in some sense and the awards. But now we kind of have to shift our focus to what is next, because you have to answer and respond if you're 3-9, or flip that if you're 9-3. You don't rest on that and think you've got it all figured out. The Hornets will lose some seniors. They lost 18 players on the final day that were playing in their final game as a Hornet and did a lot of winning for the program. You also have to watch the transfer portal. Those that could go, those that you're trying to bring in, that's an area that the Hornets will be looking at. Already reports that Danny Scudero, a freshman receiver, has entered the portal. And, those are the kind of things that not everybody goes, but you test the waters and see what can happen. There, for every, Cameron Scadaboo who left and has been thriving at Arizona State, there are others that left, and maybe it's not brighter on the other side of things. The grass isn't always greener. So decisions that each individual has to make, but also the Hornets could try to take advantage of the portal themselves and bring in a few recruits. Recruiting will be very, very important. And then their own player development will be important too. And I think when you have a season like this, you look at everything. You look at, your practicing, your scheduling, your weight training, your recruiting, your position coach. You just have to look at it all and assess everything and realize how much of it is weighted towards injuries and how much of it was weighted towards other mistakes. And that's, I can't tell enough about that. I mean, I'm leaning how much of a factor this was injury-wise, and the story I relate to that is the last 2 games the Hornets played. They played Montana State and Bozeman, and being around the press box that day, a lot of people in their booth and in that area were really bummed that he's a stud, keep in mind, but they're all defensive conference player, defensive end. Brody Grebe was going to be out for the game. Like, we don't have Grebe. And they were going nuts about that, thinking, man, what an impact it's going to be. They don't have him. I'm thinking, really? You know how many starters are out for the Hornets, and you're missing one? UC Davis. I know Scott Marsh, their longtime radio voice for a long, long time. He said, look, our year, we've been as healthy as can be, And he said after the Causeway, that's as banged up as they've ever been in a game. And I know they lost one of their starting offensive linemen. I'm like, guys, it's not even close, the comparison between the amount of injuries between other teams and the Hornets. So it's not a woe is me, but it's my point being how much of a factor truly was the injuries. And to me, I feel like it's massive. But they've got to know that. And I'm saying the coaches, the players, everybody internally has to be able to weigh that and say, okay, was it strictly that? If it's that, then you run it back and everything's good. If there's more to it, then you got to decipher that and figure out what more to it is. So, again, what's next? You look at recruiting, you look at the portal, you look at everything, and your own player development, getting the guys that are sticking around and want to play and be Hornets. Everybody's got to develop and get better, and that means, non-practices, weight training, conditioning, spring ball, all those things will be important for the Hornets as they get ready for next season. And speaking of next season, the schedule for next year will begin on August 30th. So the Hornets are going to have another 12-game schedule. It'll be 6 games at home, 6 on the road, and they're going to open up again with 2 more on the road. I think that was the stat we had at the end of the season. 10 of the last 15 games for the Hornets had been on the road, so now make it, 12 of the 17? I mean, that's crazy. But it's going to be at South Dakota State, so I don't know how they're going to do in the playoffs, but they could be the national champs. Then you open up after that on the road again, week 2 at Nevada, so very difficult start for the Hornets at South Dakota State, at Nevada. The other 2 non-league games will be Mercyhurst at home and Central Arkansas on September 20th. The Hornets will open up Big Sky play on the 27th, also at home, so a 3-game homestand against Cal Poly. They'll have the bye week after that. Then they go to Weber State, host Northern Colorado, host Montana, go to Eastern, go to Portland State, host Idaho, and finish across the Causeway for the Causeway Classic at Davis. So the teams they avoid next year in conference play, everybody misses out on 3 teams. They won't play Idaho State. They won't play playoff-bound Northern Arizona, and they won't play number 1 Montana State. So there's some things that are favorable for the Hornets schedule. I would say some things that are not, but the schedule is what it is, and you play it. And years when the Hornets went, undefeated or won 8, 9 games, won 2 games, the schedule is what it is. Everybody's got some tough pockets, some different times. And again, at South Dakota State, at Nevada, home for Mercyhurst, home for Central Arkansas, home for Cal Poly, bye week, at Weber State, home for Northern Colorado, home for Montana. So that's 5 home games in a 6-week or 7-week stretch with a bye week. And then at Eastern, at Portland, home for Idaho, at UC Davis. So 3 of the last 4 will be on the road. So, wow. A memorable year, not in the way we want to remember it, not as memorable as the previous 4. But, look, I still love seeing this team play, this program. The other things we'll watch, too, by the way. Will they be a Pac-12 team? Will they move up to the Mountain West? The stadium developments. Are all those things going to keep going forward, or, there'll be bumps in the road along the way? That's why we follow it all, and that's why we kind of listen to podcasts like this and share thoughts amongst the community, because this Hornet fan base has grown. It was great to see 16,000 plus at the Causeway. Hornets, I think, were top. I want to say before that, we're about top 12 in the nation in attendance at the FCS level. So they've done a really good job. The fans care, and they've done a great job of building up and building this program. So a year like this is a tough one to go through. That's why you hope it's just a one and done in that situation. So thank you so much. A lot of me talking today, but I hope you appreciated that. Thank you, too, by the way. I do want to do one last thank you. Did not do a podcast last week. I don't feel like I need to apologize for that, but I do. Sorry for that, because I try to do this every week and be consistent, but I did have the unfortunate family time with my family and passing of my mother, and a lot of you reached out to me, and I cannot tell you how much that means. I mean, it truly does, and that just, I don't know. It goes a long way. We got a short amount of time here in this world, and there's enough bickering and complaining and griping about all this stuff, but there are good people out there, and when you reach out, it does mean a lot. So, cherish the ones you have out there. Be good to people out there. It's Thanksgiving time and holiday time. Hopefully enjoy your family and friends and loved ones and Hornets out there. So thank you for listening, and thank you for those nice comments sent my way as well. Anyway, that is it. That's our final edition of the football season for the Stingers Up Sacramento State Football Podcast. I'm Jason Ross. We'll talk to you next season.